Kyle Scott, crossingbroad.com. His column will be up on our website, 973ESPN.com. And I don't know, man. This one, I don't know what Vegas is telling us with this. We talked about this all week. The far-fetchedness of this series is Toronto would have to win 4 games in a row. They won in the regular season in Oakland. They would win 3 in this series. How do they win? How do you even come to terms with winning 3 in a row there? Or Golden State would have to win 3 games in Toronto to win this series. So I don't know how the gambling line is set for a series that has 2 far-fetched scenarios. Kyle, please help us.
First of all, I would have FaceTimed CM Punk to really put the guy on the spot.
I don't know that he would have taken that from me. You know, it's nice enough that he returns my text. I don't know if the FaceTime is coming yet.
FaceTime.
By the way, I'm not an Apple guy, so that's out.
Okay. All right. Anyway, good to talk to you guys. Yeah, so this series has kind of been all over the place. So here's what I would say from the standpoint of what is the line telling you? What is Jersey telling you now? You don't even need to say Vegas anymore. So 2.5, 3, open somewhere around 3.5. It's a shorter line than it was in games 3 and 4, at least pre-Clay being out in game 3. It was around 4.5. So I read that as a Raptors line for sure. In fact, game 3, I think, opened at like 5.5. Then it hovered at 4.5, and then Clay was out, and it immediately came down to 3. And then Game 4 was somewhere around 4.5 or 4. So the fact that this has gone anywhere from 2.5 to 3, to me, it's a big time Raptors line here, and as it should be, by the way. I mean, they've been the better team, 85% of the series. They've outplayed the Warriors, 7 of the 8 quarters in Golden State. So they're deserving of that line. Little factoid here, at home this season, the Warriors have only been favored by less than 5 points. This will be the 6th time, including all 3 times in this series. They are only 2-3 against the spread in those situations, obviously 0-2 in this series. So very much a Raptors line tonight.
So if you're going to take the Raptors and you want to parlay, Kyle, because I got annoyed. I think the first 3 games were good for the over, and then game 4, KD or whatever it was, the game KD comes back, everybody's thinking, oh, even more over, and then it winds up being an under, and I just got fed up with it and didn't even touch game 5. So where would you go right now? Raptors and over or Raptors and under?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So you had the war. I kind of want to touch the over under. For all the reasons you just
mentioned. I was going to say, you're on the website here.
If I was doing it, I would do Raptors and the under. Now, 70% of the money thereabouts right now, depending on the book, is on the over. In some places, it looks like it may have crept up now to 212. But to me, it feels low, and it's been kind of holding steady there. When you consider that the Warriors had 109 points, we talked about this last week, each of the first 3 games, kind of look at it this way. If they are going to win and you figure 109 is kind of their number, then you're probably looking at an under. They need to keep it a little lower. If the Raptors are going to win and the Warriors are going to score 109, then you're probably going over. But I don't know. The fact that it's a low line and that you've got the money coming on the over pretty heavily and it's, holding kind of low, I just feel like that's trying to tell you something. But to your point, some high-scoring games early, games 4 and 5, seem to kind of pull back the reins a little bit. So I don't want to mess with the over-under in this one, especially when you have, no continuity. You have Durant back briefly, then he goes out for a game. There's just some injury concerns. You just don't know what team you're going to get, which team is really going to shoot high, which team's going to struggle. Each team has had a really good and a really bad shooting performance in this series, so I'm not messing with that.
Yeah, and it's a tough one. Kyle Scott, crossingbroad.com, looking at some betting tips and trends for tonight. Now, the 2.5, as you mentioned, it's one of the lowest lines for them, and then the 2.11. It'll be interesting to see what happens if this ends up going to a game 7 with the trends here in terms of how they change this line here. Because I too agree with you that this is a Raptors line tonight. But if they end up not winning this game, what would end up happening in a game 7? What would your thought be on what that line would look like for a game 7? Because that game would be on Sunday, so we would not be on the air. So I'm interested to see just a early thought on what the line might be on Sunday night.
Man, let's say the Warriors come out tonight and win solid, convincingly, we'll call it. I don't know. I mean, maybe we're looking at like -4 for the Raptors. I mean, even if the Warriors are super impressive tonight, the Raptors have been the better team. They're going to be at home. They've been a shorter favorite than the Warriors were at home, so maybe it's a little bit lower. But I think you're seeing the bookmakers reversing course a little bit in the fact you have the shortest line of the series, tonight in a do-or-die game for the Warriors, and it's only 2.5 or 3. So I think the Raptors are getting more respect. When you look at even the money line numbers, the implied probability with the money line numbers, and you compare that to some of the expected value charts on the 538s of the world, up until this game, the Raptors have been consistently undervalued, i.e. pre-series, they were given like a 52% chance to win, but their implied value was only like 32 to 36%. Right now, those things have evened out. So the books are giving the Raptors the respect they deserve. Maybe that gets undone a little bit tonight if they get the doors blown in, but I would suspect, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 at home for the Raptors for Game 7.
All right, a couple player props that you find interesting for tonight's Game 6.
Yeah, I've been on this one all series. I haven't bet it every time, but the models really like Kyle Lowry's under. Obviously, he's gone over 2 of the last 3 games, but he's still having trouble with his left thumb. I'm a big Lowry fan. But the over-under on his points has gone up to 15.5. It was as low as 13.5 in this series. So if you like that, you are getting the most value you've gotten on a Kyle Lowry over-under 15.5. Another under, this one I'm going to play.
That Kyle Lowry play is like me with Ricky Fowler. Every major, I'm going Fowler.
You better fade him now because he's leading.
I know, right now. Yep, I'm in.
Take a put option on Fowler. It's early. I like Fowler, too. He's always in contention, and then it just feels like it always unwinds.
Yes.
Never in a big way. Just he just fades. Iguodala, over under 8.5 points. So this, I'm all over the under on this. So over the last 8 games, he's only broken 8 once. And maybe this is counterintuitive, but he actually scores less with Durant off the floor. And part of the reason is, Durant has that high gravity. He pulls defenders his way. So Andre Iguodala usually benefits by being open when Durant's on the court. He scores 38% more points per minute with Kevin Durant on the floor. And his numbers, as soon as Durant went out in this playoffs this spring, Iguodala's scoring numbers have gone way down. So I like the under on Iggy, under 8.5. William Hill is getting some interesting value here. So they have Cousins, points plus rebounds, only 16.5. That feels very low for someone who looks like they're going to have a serious role now in Game 6. Started to get his feet under him last game. Kind of like the value there. And another one where you're just getting sheer value. Whether you like it or not, it's a different story. Steph Curry, rebounds, points, and assists, 42.5. At William Hill. At PointsBet, Sugar House, DraftKings, that number is 44.5. So you're getting a full 2 points of value at William Hill. Steph Curry, 42.5 points, rebounds, assists. So those are some of the props to look out for. Those last 2 you're just getting value at William Hill. The others, I kind of like the under for Lowry and Iguodala.
What do you think about the Draymond? I think you can get 2-1 on 13.5 points. And even when he's had bad games, it seems like in the fourth quarter he gets like 3 or 4 quick ones to get up over into the double digits.
Yep, the one I even like. Yeah, the one I like even better on Draymond PointsBet. You can get him triple double plus 250. We had one in, so I'm with you on this. He's been pretty good in this series. He had a triple double in Game 1. He missed it by 2 assists in another game and 1 rebound in another game. So you can get him at 2.5 to 1 for the triple double. I'd probably play it that way. Get a little extra value. You can almost bank on him at least getting the double double in some regard. So you get a little bit of upside there if he picks up an extra assist somewhere.
All right, let's get to the U.S. Open. Yes, Fowler's in the lead, but any U.S. Open tips, any odds that you like to jump out? I saw some interesting ones myself. I'm interested to see if you got any tips for the listeners out there for this weekend.
So one of the things here is, I know Koepka, was talking about how he doesn't get the respect. He wasn't in Fox's promo. The bettors were respecting him. So 30 at DraftKings online, 35% of all of their money was on either Tiger or Koepka, which is, to be expected. Tiger's always going to get a lot of play. So he was getting the respect there. But the one thing that caught our eyes when you looked at the different books, so Mickelson, obviously, he's a long shot. But maybe William Hill was on to something. I think it was them who had him at 25-1, whereas he was 46-1 and 55-1 elsewhere. So there was some, we did this for the Masters and the PGA. Usually the books are pretty close in consensus, but Phil Mickelson was all over the place, and his value was like half at William Hill. So maybe it's just a sheer value thing, or maybe they know something nobody else does for him to pick up his U.S. Open. But that was the thing that caught our eye. A lot of divergent lines among the books for the U.S. Open, more so than some of the other majors so far.
Do you have any thoughts on last night's Blues, the guy who bet $400? Any interesting tidbits on the Stanley Cup last night?
Yeah, so everyone's probably heard the story. He bet $400, won $100K. So there were some interviews with the bookmakers out in Vegas, who had some of the casinos had six-figure exposure last night when the Blues won. But they said they mitigated their losses a little bit by, making Bruins lines more enticing throughout the series. So they were able to kind of, again, mitigate those losses. But some casinos took six-figure hits. DraftKings didn't take any the longest odds the Blues were at DraftKings was 75-1. They didn't take any action on that, but on February 6th, they took a 45-1 bet on the Blues at $100. So that paid out $4,500. Also in the Western Conference Finals, they took a $5,000 bet at plus 750. So they paid out $32,500 on that bet last night. For Craig Berube and Braden Shen to add to the list of former Flyers to pick up their cups.
That's right.
Guessing that wager didn't come from Philadelphia.
No. The biggest question, so that was what we were discussing earlier in the show, is if you would have the Stones to throw $400 down on such a long shot, and then the guy was offered $75,000 to get out of that ticket, and he had the Stones enough to say, nah, I'm okay.
Well, I mean, look, you could do one of these things like Vegas Dave does, and, you can throw some big money at like 5 or 6 long shot bets and cross your fingers that one of them hits, and then you can go around, professing yourself as the world's smartest tout. So that's probably the play. You don't tell people about all the ones that didn't hit. You just tell them about the one that did hit. So you just speculate wildly.
Right.
I'm not opposed to that.
Kyle Scott
took them to 45-1 after they started winning. That's a smart bet.
By the way, the Flyers,
and he got some good value.
The Flyers are 25-1 right now to win next year. So now's your time to put your $400 down to see if you can capitalize just like that better. What was his name? Scott Berry, I think his name was. This is Kyle Scott
at Flyers money in your 401.
Yes, exactly. at Crossing Broad on Twitter, and check out the column coming up on the betting tips at 97.3ESPN.com. All right, man. Thanks a bunch.
See you, Kyle.
Thanks, guys.